Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hotter Than Hell podcast. This is your last stop on the crazy train of hard rock and heavy metal. So sit back, buckle in, and hang on. Here we go.
Hello, you Hotter Than Hellions. Welcome to another episode of the Hotter Than Hell podcast. My name is Steve Wright. I am your host, and I am here joined as always by
BC. How you doing, Hellions?
All right, BC. And we have Dylan behind the control board again.
Here I am.
And today we have from the Great White North, Mark Anthony K. How you doing, Mark?
Good. How you guys doing?
We are great. We're going to have a great conversation with Mark today about his awesome project, Project Gemineye, and the awesome album An Ordinary Day. We're going to talk about that quite a bit today, and some of the other projects that Mark has been involved in, and perhaps a little bit of future stuff down the line there. Before we get into that, we're going to do our thank yous real quick here, and we're going to start off with BC.
All right, people. Jim Pukowski, R.A. Firosi, Christina Green, Spencer Whitmore, Mark Arnold, Walt Amatovich, Adam Cox, Cindy Russick, Jim Rubin, Pat Bass, Dan Pawlowski, Michelle Sarah, Christine Gallinat Apostolico, Brian Rushin, Randy Bandon, John Connor, Sue McGeehan, Craig Thomas, Matt Maida, also known as Gerber, Dennis Talbot, Antonius Gallus.
There you go.
Name, sorry. Arnold Miller Dyer, John Novobilski, Victor Ruiz, Tony Talrico.
All right, thanks, BC. I'm going to start off my thank yous here with, as always, my wife Corey that puts up with us. Awesome Dylan behind the board there. Mark Satorka that does our music. And I want to give a special thanks to Heather Shakaris that joined us last week for the Awesome Women in Rock episode. Heather, you knocked it out of the park. It was great, and I hope your mom is feeling better. Ed Spangenberg, our buddy BB, Stephen Michael and Sonny Pony of the Grown Up Rock podcast, David Hudson and Chris Craig from the Digital Killed the Radio Star podcast, Nathan Pfizer, Steve Jaworski, Matt Porter and Bobby Dreyer from the Kiss Room, Amber Bitts, Kaylin Provo, Mark Hoover, Jen Roberts Vanna. Jen, congratulations on getting your Sammy Hagar tattoo this week. Kim Klemash Quinn, Jackie Leader Yingling, Scott Sadowski, Tamara Sweeney Wiley, Nick Uzalko, Tom Marinichik, Steve Barchak, thank you for the 5-star review. We appreciate it. Robert Jacobs from the band St. James, and Steve Tilley. Thanks, everybody out there. And just a reminder, everybody, if you're a new listener, we have quite a few episodes out there. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Ear Peeler. Anywhere pretty much you could hear a podcast, we are there. We're kind of a new podcast, but we're doing pretty good. And allow me to say officially hello to Mark. How are you, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
We are great. Before we get into Mark's discussion, we're going to do 3 quick little news things here. Saxon has announced the title of their new album. It's called Thunderbolt. Will be released next year. It's being mixed by Andy Sneap. If anybody listens to this podcast, they know that he is my front runner that I want to have produce the new Kiss album, which I really don't think that will happen. But he's
snowball's chance in hell.
No. And
that was like 4 minutes.
It
into
was
the podcast.
It was.
You mentioning
it
Kiss,
was.
So.
BC's pointing at his watch. Thoughts on Saxon, BC?
I've just recently, not recently, but probably in the last 10 years, really got into Saxon. I mean, I've heard them before, listened here and there, but in the last 10 years, I've really gotten into it, and I can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah, they always put out, all their new stuff has been really strong. Mark, are you a big Saxon fan?
To be totally honest with you, I don't really follow them at all. I'm aware of them, obviously, and I've seen them on various festivals and stuff like that, but I'm not very familiar with their catalog.
Okay, cool. Well, perhaps this will give you an opportunity to, check them out, and then you can get back to us on that. Dylan, any Saxon stuff?
I'm still disappointed I didn't get to see them, but again, hopefully someday. I've always liked all their stuff. Strong Arm of the Law used to be my jam back in the day. I'm excited to hear what Andy Sneap does with the band.
Definitely. New Whitesnake, same thing. No title, though, I guess. I was under the impression that Whitesnake said that they were going to stop touring and stuff, but apparently there's a new album coming out now.
Here's another album for you.
Yeah.
And a tour.
So, David Coverdale's still doing strong. He kind of reminds me of Ozzy, that he's always surrounded by great musicians. And I think it's great that they're doing an album. I will definitely go see them. BC?
I mean, they've been another band that's been putting out steady stuff. Like you said, he's surrounded by talent. New album coming out, and then the 30th anniversary of Whitesnake coming out, and special, I guess, bonus material, DVD stuff. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, very cool, definitely. Mark, any Whitesnake stuff for you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that Whitesnake album, the self-titled one, was like, it just was left in my tape cassette player for years when it first came out. I'm a huge John Sykes fan, and I've, like, after he got booted from Whitesnake, my big thing was Blue Murder. I absolutely loved that first Blue Murder record. But I gotta say, Whitesnake, David Coverdale's been doing fantastic. I saw them live quite a few more times since then, and I've always loved Whitesnake. And live, I think they're a great band.
Yeah, they're always an excellent band, and like I said before, I'm glad that they're having a new album out, because I really want to hear how the songs come out that they co-wrote with Reb Beach and Joel Hoekstra. So that's going to be very, very cool. Now we are going to talk about what every single person that's ever even heard of Kiss is talking about, the Vinnie Vincent, in quotations, video. BC, since you're a big, huge fan of this, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
I was disappointed. First of all, no monkey. Second of all,
I knew he was going to say that.
Second of all, it was just like, it was very, I don't know, it wasn't a message or anything. It was just very like, it was me or whatever. It was very, I don't know. I expected something totally different, and I don't know. I was let down.
So it's almost like you're the citizens of Oz, and the wizard's been revealed to you, and he's just an old man.
This guy's the wizard? Oh my God!
What do you think, Mark?
I was pretty vocal about it when it first came out, because when they released the little clip, I think Michael Brandfield had a clip on it, and for some reason it just tagged into my YouTube channel, and nobody had posted it at that point. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just post it up, because nobody had it up yet. And then all of a sudden after that, everybody just started sharing it like gangbusters. But my initial comment was the same pretty much as BC's, which was, that's it? I waited all this time just to hear him say, you damn right I did.
Damn right I did.
Yeah, the question was, did Vinnie Vincent save Kiss? And he just said, you're damn right I did. Like, that's what we waited all this time for. Like, know what happened, or, great to see you guys, or I'm going to be happy to see you guys. Like, there was nothing to it except that. And that's it? Like, come on. And you don't even see him properly, just his eyes.
Yeah, I was under the impression, actually, that it was going to be a video message. I think that's how they put that out there. And, if they were going to say there was going to be an ad for the Vinnie Vincent Expo or whatever, I think that would have been perfect for it. But for them to come out and say that there's going to be a video message, I don't know. That just didn't do anything for me. I think it was kind of cool that the clips, at least they could have at least shown his whole face.
Yeah, I mean, like he's hiding his identity or anything. Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the information was cool that they put, like, all the stats and stuff, and that's great, and I had no issue with that. It's just, come on, you got to give us a little bit more than that. I mean, even if it was just 2 minutes, come on.
Yeah, I really think that they misled everybody on that.
They did. They played it up to be a video message. That means not just, you're damn right. I mean, he should have said something more, I thought.
I know. It was crazy.
And the monkey.
BC wants the monkey. All right, so I'm sure that every podcast that has even ever talked about Kiss before has talked about it. And speaking of podcasts, Mark, you're involved in a couple other podcasts. Why don't you tell us about them before we get into your musical background?
I do 2 of them, like, regularly. One of them being, obviously, the Kiss FAQ podcast with Julian Gill, and my other partners in crime, which are either Ken Keenan and Lonnie Weishauer. And sometimes we have other people like Daniel from Sweden's on, or we have Alex from Idaho who's on. And we have, we have a few people that swap out here and there, but usually it's the 4 of us that do it for most of the segments.
I really enjoy that podcast.
The other podcast that I do that I'm very, very proud of as well is I'm the co-host on the Yes Music podcast. Now, we just celebrated this week, actually, I think yesterday we posted our 300th episode.
Congratulations.
The very listened to podcast, very devoted fan base, like worldwide as far as Japan and everywhere listens to it. The guy who's the main brains behind it, Kevin Mulrine, he's a very well-respected podcaster, and with that, it just pretty much was one of those situations where I was an avid listener of the show, and one time he caught wind from a couple of emails that I sent him that I had a massive vinyl collection of Rick Wakeman albums. So he asked if I would do a couple of reviews of some of these obscure records. I did, and then as our relationship continued with my reviews, he just asked me to join him as co-host proper, and I've been on it ever since.
That's great, and congratulations on your 300th episode. We're hoping to get to 20 here. we're actually, this is actually episode number 14 for those, if anybody out there is keeping track. Well, we're talking about, Mark, you've been involved in a ton of stuff. A lot of it is like a lot of metal, like thrash kind of stuff. Why don't you give us your just general music background, and we can get into the bands you've been involved with.
So if you want to get back to the roots of everything, I come from, I wouldn't say a musical family, but I've come from a family that had music in the house constantly, whether it's Johnny Cash records or stuff like that. You got to understand, my parents are from the old country. My mom's German, and my father, who passed away a few years ago, was from Slovakia. And so there's a lot of Eastern European stuff, as well as the Johnny Cash and the Elvis and stuff like that. So I had quite a broad musical listening when I was growing up. My father played guitar in the house a lot, so he was really my first inspiration as far as guitar playing, because he'd always played in the house. My sister, who was 7 years older than me, got a guitar and was given guitar lessons. She gave up on it after about a month. She hated it, and the guitar was tucked away underneath the stairs of the house in the basement. One day I went into the basement and I found this odd-looking case, pulled it out, found a guitar, and it was a really nice copy of a Les Paul. It wasn't a real Les Paul, but it was like a copy Les Paul, and a really nice one. So I was like awestruck when I saw it. I pulled out this old crusty amp that came with it from like the 70s, plugged it in, and realized that it made this really odd noise, and I was just hooked right away. And then I self-taught myself for about a year from these little odd 60s guitar books with the really bad haircut people on there with the bad, and like, this is an E string, and they show you a really bad picture of an E string, and it's like really basic books, but I learned from it, and it helped me get started. And then, of course, the first band that I latched onto and started learning was Black Sabbath, because they were obviously awesome, and some of their songs are a bit easier to learn when you're first learning to play guitar, so I latched onto that, and it just took off from there.
Hey, how old were you when you first picked up that guitar?
12.
12? Okay. That's a good age. You're starting to mature, and you had a good music background there. When did you first starting to, branch out of the house?
I was looking at the courses in high school. I don't know if it's the same everywhere in high school. I'm guessing it is, but you get to select certain courses, and some are mandatory when you go into high school, right? So on some of the ones that I was allowed to pick my own, I saw they had a guitar course. So I was like, okay, well, that should be an easy credit, so I'll take guitar, right? So I went in there. As I was playing guitar in there, some people came up to me that were in the class with me, and they're like, hey, you know how to play, Aussie songs? Like, well, yeah, I know how to play Crazy Train and blah, 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 blah. So I met up with a few people, and within about a week of school starting, we got together a little nucleus of a band, and the one guy had a drum set, so we went to his house, of course, and jammed there. And by the time I was 16, us four gelled together, and we had done our first demo recording at a little 16-track studio in the town where I live.
Do you still have that?
I don't have it on me, but the guy who sang on it, I know he has a pristine archive of everything that I've ever done with him. So if you ever want to hear it, I'm pretty sure I can get a copy of it and let you hear it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Did it ever get released or anything, or is it just kind of something that was just a beginning thing and just like kind of sat around?
Okay, you got to remember, at this point when we were 16, there was no internet at that point, that's for sure. Everything was just word of mouth and, passing cassette copies to friends and stuff like that. So it got around our high school, but that's about it, I think. at that point, and it was just very, very basic rock at that point, because we were just really learning how to still write songs together, and then we were also learning how to record at that point too, because it's not just the simplest thing. You have to learn how to overdub and stuff like that. So it was a learning experience.
Now, is doing that later on down the conversation here, we're going to get into your current project. Was that the nucleus of you, getting interested into, production of music?
Oh yeah, the very first time we went into that studio, it was basically because I had a guitar teacher that I was going to at this guitar store, and at the back of the guitar store they had a small recording studio, and one time he said, "Come in the back here for a minute, I just have to finish something that I'm recording and then we can do your lesson." So I said, okay. So I went over there and stepped into this control room, and it was like walking into NASA. It was like all these outboard equipment and all the mixing board, and I was like, wow, what the hell is all this stuff, And then, they had a 1-inch tape machine, 16 track, and I was totally taken by it at that point. But, at that point, still, I was really wrapped up in playing guitar, but the seed was kind of planted at that point, because to me, that stuff was really beyond kind of my comprehension at that time, how it all worked, like signal flow and all that stuff. But I was definitely taken by it.
Once you started, hanging out with these guys and stuff like that, what was your first band that you got in that you were out playing shows and stuff like that? Were you just like in a cover band, or were you just all original stuff, or mix of both, or what was going on with you at early stages there?
Well, the funny thing is, we all loved Rush. Okay, all of us were deeply devoted into Rush.
Canadians loving Rush. How did that happen?
Yeah, I know, strange, eh? But we were always jamming it in the basement of the guy's house whenever we were jamming together. And what ended up happening, though, is that we never became a covers band. We just played those songs just for fun, but we were hell-bent on being an original band from day one. We always wanted to be known as that because we didn't want to be stuck with the covers stigma, where you would go out and play, a set half covers and half your originals, and when you get to your original, they'd be like, yeah, that's good, but get back to the Priest,
right,
or get back to this and that, So we always wanted, either you like our stuff and you like us, or you don't. That's how we always approached it, right? So basically, the band that I was in with those 4 guys, we went through numerous name changes. We were first called Phylum, which was a really stupid name. Then we were called Black Rose. That didn't stick at all. And then finally we got to a name which I think my sister came up with, because she came up with a really cool logo because she got into graphic arts, which was called Nasty Black. It was a very hair metal kind of thing, right? We were totally into Warrant and stuff like that. That was the first band that we actually started playing gigs in. And the funny thing with that is we had the 4 of us for a long time, and then the bass player ended up going away to college, and we had another guy come in, play bass with us. And during that time, we'd only played 1 gig in Toronto. In the 5 years we were together, we only played 1 gig, and then finally we got our second gig. And whenever I tell this story to people, they always kind of look at me like I fell out of a tree or something. But the second gig that we ever did was we played a festival in Portugal. And people always say, how the hell did you do that? I go, well, we made a cassette, a record, a 9-song record that was fully produced by a guy who is a known record producer here in Canada named Archie Hashi. He was in a band called Frozen Ghost here in Canada, and he produced it. It sounded great, and apparently the cassette got into the hands, obviously, into our bass player, but he's originally from Portugal, from the Azore Islands, and he sent the tapes back to some of his friends back there, and it got into the hands of a promoter there, and they invited us. They flew us down, gave us a place to stay, everything, and we played in this festival, and that was our second ever gig in this band.
That's awesome. Holy crap. That's amazing. Now, that was still the Warrant type, hair band type music with these guys, Nasty Black?
Yeah.
So how did you transition from the hair type stuff that you're playing with Nasty Black to the awesome cassette that you sent me, The Punishing? Was that the next thing?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes.
I thought it was really good. It was 1995, I think that came out, and really very metal, very excellent. What did you think, BC?
I liked it. I only got to listen to it once. Tomorrow I'm going to put it into my big stereo system and turn it really up. And then, but right off the bat, I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting because what ended up happening was, I guess about a year after we did that festival in Portugal, the band kind of split. Everybody had kind of little other things they wanted to pursue. And the main thing with me was I was getting a little tired of the direction that we were going in with the band. It was starting to get a little bit more like power ballady and stuff like that. And I was like, wasn't interested in that. I was really into listening to like Judas Priest and Queensryche and stuff like that. And I wanted to get more guitar heavy with stuff, right? One of my other friends who was at that time in college going for music production came back to town, and he played drums, and he was a great drummer, and he was really into Neil Peart and those kinds of drumming. And he and I sat down and decided that we were going to make a band from scratch, which was going to be The Punishing. And basically we found one guy who I knew from before in high school on guitar, so he joined in. We ended up getting, the bass player was always the tricky thing, because if you look at the cassette, it was me, Ted, the other guitar player, Alex, the singer, and Jerry, the drummer. There wasn't really ever pictured a bass player, because on the recording, I did all the bass playing, and live, whenever we played, we would always have people who would come in and last a few months, and then, because at that point, we were really, really, like, hardcore focused on it. So if you missed a jam or two, that's it. You read the riot act and tossed out, right?
Okay.
So we were very into, like, dedication into the music, right? But we went in, we found a really cool 24-track studio. We had all these songs written. We went in, recorded them, and we put them out. And, we sent out the cassettes to quite a few people, and we got some pretty positive reviews from, like, some magazines in Chicago and in New York City, and everybody said the same thing. They go, it sounds like a mix of, like, Judas Priest, Queensryche, and a hint of Rush.
You could definitely hear those influences in there. And there's some pretty kind of dark overtones in the little story you guys put inside the cassette there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Then we'll move on from The Punishing. But I thought that was kind of like a dark themed kind of thing you guys had going on that album there.
Wait, do you mean the cover? You mean?
Yeah, like on the inside jacket, I forget what it said. I forgot to bring it with me, but it just had like a little paragraph there about the music and stuff.
Oh yeah. To be honest with you, I can't remember it offhand myself either, because I think I sent you one of my last copies of the tape. I think I have one more somewhere here, but that was really written by the drummer. He was our lyricist as well in the band, and he was into these kind of, storied kind of descriptions of songs and stuff like that. So he kind of was into writing these kind of synopsis for our songs, right? And basically also the cover that's on that record, if you notice when you pull out the tape cover there, it spreads out until it's like this huge image, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that image was actually drawn by my sister, and I remember the very first time I saw it, I looked at her and I go, listen, Jane, can I use this for a cover? And she's like, yeah, you go ahead, you can use it. And I was always just taken by it, because you can read into so many different things on there, like, the whole hinting of World War III and, all those things that are on there. It's, that's the one thing that I always got told by family members is like, why do you have to be so negative with your music? And it's not that it's negative, it's just that that's the kind of, when you think of those kind of themes, you can usually write cool music around those things. If you're writing about happy themes, it's not exactly the best themes to write heavy music to.
Yeah, and sadly, there's not a lot of Ronnie James Dio. He was probably the only one that could credibly pull off singing about rainbows.
Yeah, exactly.
So now The Punishing, I thought that was really good. I listened to it like 2 or 3 times, and I was finally able to get it to BC yesterday. He thought it was really cool. Did you just jump right into Reckon with One like right after that? Because it's a very short period of time there. It's a couple years between the two.
Basically, what ended up happening was there was an interesting story behind that, because we were always looking for a singer at one point, because Alex ended up doing some other stuff. We brought another singer in, and he was a good singer, but he was kind of a flake guy, right? One of those guys where you would go in and work on a recording, you would get the bill at the end of the recording session. It was like $400, and he would be the one that would give $20, So it was one of those guys where you're like, what?
Yay, team.
Yeah. So we were like, what? We don't need people like this in our situation. So it was always hard to find people who were really solid about the stuff like we were. So long story short, The singer in Nasty Black, he used to love our stuff when he was younger, and he was coming to our practices, and he was just taken by the whole music thing. And then he started playing guitar himself, and then he caught wind that we were looking for a bass player at one point and a singer, and he came in just one time to one of our rehearsals. It was just me and Jerry at that time at this rehearsal spot. He came in with a bass guitar, and we had one of the best jam sessions we ever had. We played every Rush song that we could think of for the next 3 hours in that room, and we actually beat them straight through. We didn't have to teach them nothing, singing wise or bass playing wise.
Really?
And we were like, holy shit, this is can I say that?
Oh, absolutely. You could F-bomb or whatever you want to do.
So we were like, holy shit, this guy knows everything. And lo and behold, we just sat him down and said, listen, if you're serious about this, we'd love to have you in the band. And he was like, all for it. And then Ted, he was still in the band from The Punishing, but he ended up having issue with it. He thought that Andy was too young. He was about 4 years younger than we were, so he didn't think that he was at the same level or whatever that as we were. So he wasn't too hooked on it, so we let him go and said, okay, that's fine. We left sort of on decent terms. We ended up just going, the three of us, in to a recording studio in Toronto, and we did our first record there, The Shock to the System, and it really started snowballing from there.
The Reckon with One stuff is excellent. We've been kind of binging on that lately. But just a great album to start out with, you guys. Songs like The Factory, Implant, Time, Intellect, Rain. Now, when you guys were, who was the main writer in this? In Reckon with One, was it you?
This is the great thing about that situation was we had it all kind of mapped out, and this wasn't done at first decided this way. It just kind of fell into this situation where me and Andy would get together and write the music together. We just come together, write a bunch of parts. We always had a tape recorder rolling, so we would get our ideas down on something and listen back to them. So we always came up with the music, and Jerry, the drummer, wrote all the lyrics. It was very Rush, you know what I mean? We wrote the music, Jerry wrote all the lyrics and helped with the arranging, and that's how he did everything.
So you guys have your first album out. Were you guys just touring in the Toronto area, or did you get out there and tour the whole province? What do you guys call them? Are they provinces up in Canada?
Province, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically what happened is we did the recording, we sent it out, we started playing some gigs around the Toronto area, and then we got really ambitious. We said to ourselves, you know what, no one's going to take us seriously until we start getting out of Toronto, because everybody plays in Toronto, big deal. We'll just be like every other band here. So I bought myself one of these books. This is back in the day, of course, those industry handbooks that have all the different promoters and clubs from all across North America. And I sat down, racked up my long distance charges like crazy, and I booked a tour of Canada for ourselves on that first record. We only had one album out, and we went from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is on the very east side of Canada, all the way over to Calgary. We were supposed to get to Vancouver, but the Vancouver gig kind of petered out by the time we got down that far, so we didn't end up going there. But we did a cross-Canada jaunt on that first record, and then we ended up doing that every time we put out a record.
Were there any shows in the United States, or was there problems with? I'm sure there was work visa issues and stuff like that. But did you guys ever make it to the States at all?
We had never ended up playing in the States. But the funny thing was, as the internet started coming into use at that point, when MySpace was really big at that point and stuff like that, a lot of our listenership that would go to our MySpace page was all U.S. So it was kind of a lost opportunity for us. We should have went, because we had a lot of people that were listening to our music on that side of the globe. So we didn't end up going, mainly because we were still kind of green to the whole thing. We didn't know about how to get work visas for that and stuff like that. So we were kind of, we were still out of the loop. And again, that was all a learning experience. So as we started going through more situations where things came up for us, we had to investigate more and more things, and then we learned how to do those things, or I learned how to do those things.
That's great. I was just going to say, were you pretty much the manager of the band and the booking agent and everything like that?
Yeah, pretty much. I pretty much did everything, and I arranged, getting us to do interviews in magazines and going to radio stations. But you know what? I didn't mind doing that. I liked doing that stuff. And I always told the guys, I go, I don't mind doing it, just as long as whenever I book something to do, that at least one of you or all of you guys come with me to do the radio spots or do the interviews. And they were always good with that. I have nothing bad to say about that. Those guys always showed up to every radio thing we ever had to do together. They were really committed guys.
It's cool to see that someone needs to take the reins in a band, and I'm sure you guys weren't out actively looking for a management or anything like that, because you seem to be just taking everything, upon yourself, but you really want to get it done.
Every once in a while we would look around and explore those avenues. And the one time that kind of, I think, was the nail in the coffin where we said, you know what, fuck this, we'll just do it ourselves permanently, is we had this contact through somebody for a guy who apparently was a pretty decent manager guy who apparently had connections and stuff. So we met this guy. We went to his office, and he had like that typical kind of office you see in like those Hollywood movies. Like he has 10,000 8x10s on his walls, and he has 1 or 2 gold albums on there. So you're thinking, okay, so he must know what the hell he's doing. But after he opened his mouth and spoke for about 10 minutes, we realized this guy was not the guy for us. Basically, I'll narrow it down to this. He said to us, I'm what you call a middle tier manager. And we're like, what does that mean? He goes, well, basically, I have the contacts, I know all the people to go to, and I could set up, an album release party for you guys and stuff like that in a year's time, but I don't have the money to do anything like that. You'd have to pop all the money in. What the hell good is that?
You might as well do it yourself.
That's why we get a manager. Yeah, a manager is supposed to be the guy who's supposed to help us, monetarily as well with this stuff. Find, resources and for us to get money to record and stuff like that. If you're just going to be sitting here doing nothing and we're just going to come bringing you money, then no wonder you have all these nice gold albums that you probably bought with all these people's money, on your wall, because I don't think you did a hell of a lot, because I never even heard this guy before.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be an invested partner in the band, I would think. Yeah,
exactly. That's why we thought this guy's full of shit, and we just left, and we just kept it. We kept doing it all ourselves, and we did fairly good. We did like 3 tours. We did a bunch of big festivals. Like we played with Strapping Young Lad and all kinds of other bands. God Forbid. We played with Nevermore here in Toronto. We played with tons of great bands. We played with Anvil. We played with Razor. We played with I can't even recall half the bands, but we did so many great things. It was awesome.
That's really cool, though. How was the crowd response on these things? Obviously, you had a good thing going because you have 4 albums out, and I noticed that you released 1999, 2002, 2005. After Inhuman Need, there was a hiatus, and you were in Pile Driver in that period, right?
Yeah, I was in Pile Driver at that point. Yeah, because after Inhuman Need, Andy, the guy who played bass in there, and at that point we also had a keyboard player that joined for that time as well, which was really, really cool time. It really expanded our sound, and we were turned into a really good live band at that point. But after that album came out, Andy ended up going to become a police officer. So we just kind of split the band. We didn't think that it would have been right to continue the band without it, because we had been such a tight band, just the 3 of us. And then plus when we brought Drew in, the keyboard player, he was the only guy that we ever thought about bringing in as another person. We never wanted to bring anybody else in, but he was such a good keyboard player and a good friend. We brought him in, and he was perfect for it. But after it split, we just didn't think that it would be the same vibe without him in it. So we just split it up, and I ended up joining Pile Driver with Jerry. He joined as well on drums.
Oh, okay. How did that come about? Because they had some albums and stuff under their belt, or at least a following at that time, correct?
That's kind of an understatement. The record that they put out in 1984 or 85, which is called Metal Inquisition, there's pretty solid verification that album has sold over 500,000 copies. So they had more than a following. And especially in Europe, and I'll get to that in a second, they were pretty huge. What ended up happening was, we were playing around Toronto quite a bit. We played a lot of festivals. We played in a lot of bigger shows. Like I said, with Nevermore, we played with Sonata Arctica and a bunch of other really cool European bands here. So we were a pretty good draw. Like sometimes we were put on first with some of these bigger bands. And usually when you're the first band, you're usually playing to like 5 people and a few crickets at that point, right?
Yeah.
Until it builds up, right? But we were lucky enough that we had such a good following that the promoters noticed that when they put us on first, that we would at least have more than a quarter, almost half a house filled with just us.
That's great.
Yeah, so they always loved putting us on because of that, right? And so the manager of Piledriver at that time, which was a guy named Ray Black Metal Wallace, who had passed away, so rest in peace, Ray. He was looking around at that point for a lead guitar player because what Gord told us, Gord Piledriver, Kirchen, the main guy, that he always had trouble having people in the band too. Other people were alcoholics or this and that, and there's always some problem with somebody. Piledriver originally was just a studio act, which was just Gord and one other guy, and the other guy was just did everything musically, recorded it, and he just sang on it, and it became a huge hit, these records, right? It was just a studio thing. It was never live until the 2000s when he just made this band up, right? So he ended up calling me, which is the manager guy. He ended up contacting me and asking me if I'd be interested in auditioning for the lead guitar player position. And I was like, yeah, okay. I said, yeah, sure, I'll check it out, because I wasn't too familiar with their music at that time. So he sent me 4 or 5 songs. I listened to it. I said, yeah, this is pretty good. I contacted Gord, because that was the first thing he wanted to do. He wanted to see how we would get along personally wise, right? And we totally clicked. Like, we talked about Rush, Frank Zappa, and all this stuff. And we were on the phone. I looked at my watch, and it was like 3.5 hours we were on the phone with each other. So we totally gelled as people. And then I told him, because he mentioned too that, that the drummer in the band was kind of ticking him off as well. And I kind of said, well, Gord, I know somebody who might be a perfect fit for drumming in this band. And he's like, oh yeah, who's that? And I said, the guy in my old band. And he goes, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll arrange a time to go to this rehearsal studio that he knows about that's kind of out of the way. And you bring him along. I'll bring the bass player guy and the other guitar player, and we'll see what happens. So we went there and jammed the songs after we had practiced them together, me and Jerry, a bit, and he loved it. He asked us to join, and then the next couple of years of our life was totally exciting and something we never expected to happen.
Was it the Exalted Piledriver at this time when you guys were in there?
Yeah, and
Okay.
He changed it to the Exalted Piledriver because Piledriver was popping up all over the net with other bands for some reason. Like, there was some rapper guy named Piledriver, and there's some like Mexican metal band called Pile. So he was like, you know what? To separate us, we're just going to call it the Exalted Piledriver.
The Exalted Piledriver. That's kind of like a Gwar kind of setup, right? Live.
Yeah, like what ended up happening was because he had a very set look with the whole S&M kind of costume,
Right.
with the
The
mask
spikes.
and stuff like that. Yeah, he wanted to have it so that it wasn't just him in a costume and then like 4 guys in regular street clothes. He wanted to have a definite look for the whole band, right? So what he told us to do, and we thought this is really cool. At first we were kind of like, really? You want us to do this? And he's like, yeah. So he goes, first he brought us to his house, and he said, first of all, I have to rechristen you guys. You can't go by your regular names.
I was just going to say, do you want to say your name, or do you want me to say it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark was known as Kinky Pork Cream
Yeah.
in the Exalted Piledriver.
Yeah, so what ended up happening is that he had this little cool program on his computer, and he would insert the name, and it was like an anagram thing where you would put your name in, and it would scramble your name up and give you like 17 or, even as much as 50 different alterations of your name. And that one came up, and he just started laughing his ass off. He's like, Kinky Pork Cream, that's perfect. So he's like, that's your name. Okay.
I was wondering how they came up with that.
Yeah, and then Jerry had to do the same thing. He ended up being rechristened Glace Frothfritter, which is really weird. It sounded like a really odd donut or something.
Yeah, sounds like something to get at the state fair.
Yeah, but the other guys in the like Lobo Elf Snort, right, and all these odd names, So he renamed us, And then he said, okay, this is what we're going to do with the costume. All of you guys have to wear masks. And we're like, oh, great. So I had this skull mask, right? And it was so big on my head, it felt like I was wearing a fishbowl on my head, you know. But the costume itself was really interesting because he said, okay, bring a pair of jeans and bring a shirt or a couple of shirts that you don't care about ruining. I'm like, okay. So I brought my jeans and I brought a couple of shirts, and him and his wife would take the scissors out and completely hack the shit out of our clothes and take all this costume blood, like from like theaters, like this fake blood, and drench it all in blood and dry it. And when you put it on, you literally looked like zombies. It looked really cool. And before we would go out on stage, his wife would come out with this little small bottle of blood and douse us all over our skin with this blood. So when we came out on stage, we looked bloody as hell. And people were always like freaked out when they saw us at first, you know, because we were like full of blood. But it was a really cool thing, and people caught on to it really quickly.
Now, at some point for your following, did fans ever show up dressed like you guys?
Nobody ever came dressed up like that, thank God. But they were really into it. Like, there were times like when there was like a segment of girls that used to always come that always wanted me to kind of grab them by the arm because I had blood all over me, and for some reason they were fascinated with getting the blood on them. Huh. That's the only thing that was kind of odd about the whole thing.
That is a little strange.
Whatever floats your boat, right?
Yeah. Because I was looking at the pictures, and it was kind of reminding me of a cross between, costume-wise, Gwar and Slipknot.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, whenever people bring that up with Gord, whenever we did interviews, that was something that really annoyed him.
Oh, really? You guys were doing it first. Way first.
Say, you know what? He goes, those guys owe me huge, because if it wasn't for me, there would be no Slipknot or any of those bands. And he was really adamant about that. I kind of backed him because it's true.
Yeah, if you just look at the timing of the years, definitely true. So then, Pile Driver, you were out of that, and then you came back with the EP Before the Storm again for Reckon with One, correct?
Yeah, I ended up getting out of that. We did a lot of great things. We did a lot of tours. We went to Europe and toured on the album, because Pile Driver did an album, like a comeback record that I wrote a lot of the songs with. Like, not all of them, but I wrote about 3 or 4 songs on there, and Gord wrote the rest. And we went to Metalworks, which is a really renowned studio here in Toronto, and recorded it. And it did really well, and we did a bunch of touring. And then Gord later on started having a little bit of health issues, which we were really trying hard to get over with him, like to help him get out of it. But it was starting to get a little too much. It was getting a little stressful on him, like health-wise, right? So I ended up leaving the band. Jerry ended up leaving before that because his wife had gotten pregnant, so he's going to become a father, and he wanted to spend, time with his wife and his family at that point. So he left, and it just kind of fell apart at that time. I think thankfully now Gord has a few people back in it now, and he does the occasional festival, so that's cool. I'm glad he's back up and running again. And but I ended up starting the Reckon with One thing back again, and I connected with an old friend on vocals, and I found a couple of people here in Toronto, and I went back and started working on getting the band back together.
That was Before the Storm. Did that just kind of fizzle out, or did you just feel it wasn't the thing for you to do? You wanted to move on with your own stuff, or what happened there?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I was starting to record that record EP, I had already started it under the moniker of Project Gemineye. And what ended up happening was, because it was all me at that time when I started it, then I brought in Mike to sing. And then I found those other guys, and we decided to say, you know what, instead of starting with something new, let's just get back with this band. People knew about it already in Toronto. And the drummer that I had, he was in a pretty popular band from Toronto too called War Machine at the time. So he drummed on the record as well and stuff like that. We started, preparing to do stuff, but because Mike the singer lived in Vancouver and we lived in Toronto, there was always that separation. It was very difficult to convince him to come here for a period of time to do any kind of shows. And because of that, we never ever practiced together as a band. So long story short, I started getting very annoyed with the way things were going because also he started getting the idea of maybe doing a few different things, things that I didn't think we needed to do at the time. And it was starting to be a situation where there were too many chefs in the kitchen.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then fate intervened. And I'll tell you what that means, is that while I was thinking about what to do with this band, because I wasn't happy at all with what was going on, I broke my leg. I broke it bad. I broke my femur bone.
Ouch.
In my leg. Yeah. Let's put it this way. I took a step out my house because apparently I had a hairline fracture that I didn't know about for half a year in my leg. And when I took a step down, because I had warning of this, because 4 days before this happened, I started feeling like my leg was really sore. I didn't know what the hell was going on with it. So I went to get an x-ray done. They said, there was nothing there. Maybe it was just arthritis or something. And I said, okay, fine. So I was going to go to the doctor in the morning. I go and step outside my front door, and I heard something that sounded like a gunshot, and it was my leg breaking.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, and I fell down, and the whole street, because this is like 5 o'clock in the morning, the whole street heard me screaming. Like every light down the street started turning on. Like one house turned on, another house turned on. Because I was screaming so loud, I think the whole street heard me. The ambulance came, and this is a kind of a funny point. The guy who was trying to calm me down and putting me on the stretcher, because I was like, please don't pick me up. It's gonna hurt, because and he's like, I gotta do it, dude. And because he was a totally cool Canadian kind of guy, this ambulance dude, and he grabbed me by the shoulders and he says, if you have to scream, scream.
Yep.
So he picked me up, put me on there, and all I could remember was just screaming my brains out when he did that. And he looked at me and he goes, are you in a band? And I go, yeah. And he goes, you really should be the singer, because you have a really good screaming voice. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've dealt with that too with our jobs. You if you gotta cry, cry. If you gotta scream, scream.
Yeah, I believe it. And so I ended up in the hospital. I got surgery done. I've got a steel plate put in and 8 screws in my leg, and I sat in hospital for 3 months. So that gave me the perfect opportunity to tell the guys, listen, I broke my leg. The band's done.
Right.
Okay.
So you had your out.
Yeah, I had my out. And then while I was in hospital, and as I started getting better, music started really re-entering my life again. I started getting really excited about music. I was going on Amazon, much to the chagrin of my bank account, and I was ordering all these box sets, King Crimson box sets, and this and that, and I was having my mom deliver it to my hospital room, and in my hospital room that I had all these musical things, like all these box sets, and I would listen to music, and I started drawing all these ideas for Project Gemineye. So those are like the seed of the idea, right? So that's really how the transition to Project Gemineye started, was while I was there. I started getting all these ideas about what I wanted to do musically, even visually too. So that's what happened, and that's how I got to this point.
Now, would you say that, talking about the title of the first Project Gemineye album, An Ordinary Day, was that kind of a conscious thing of you being in the hospital for 3 months? Like everything was an ordinary day at that point? Did that kind of factor in at all?
Very close. You're very close. Because what ended up happening, and I guess I'll sort of leak it on your show so you have kind of an exclusive.
All right.
The Ordinary Day album and the next album that's coming out, hopefully in November, I'm going to release the first single October 9th, which is Thanksgiving here in Canada. The next album, which is called A Brand New Day, and I think you've seen the cover as well for
yes.
that. They're kind of related. Those songs, the 6 on the first album, the 6 on the next one, were originally written together as one whole project. And really, if you put the songs in the proper order, it's a concept story about me breaking my leg and then recovering and getting back into regular life again.
I could see that now. So did you pull an elder on us? Did you change the order of the songs for release?
Yes, I did. I totally rejiggered the whole thing. And the great thing is, as part of the Gemineye Club, and this is a great plug for people who haven't joined it yet, once I release Brand New Day, I'm going to release in the Gemineye Club a little note and part of the package with other things that I sent you guys. and I'm going to give you guys the proper, correct sequence order that the songs go into to make the story one.
But when you re-release that, we're going to have to buy it again now, because there's going to be the old version and then the new version, right?
Well, basically, what's going to happen is I released Ordinary Day, and Brand New Day is going to have the other 6 songs. Now, basically, they're not in the right order, even if you were to listen to it beginning to end, album 1, beginning to end, album 2. They're not in the right order still.
Okay.
There's songs that are on record 2 that should be on record 1, and so on and so forth. That's why I'm saying that when I give you guys the notes, you'll see which songs should be put in where. And almost if you were to put them into your Apple or your iTunes player, you can rearrange it,
right,
and you'll see how it totally flows together.
That's gonna be very cool. Once you got out of the hospital, did you immediately start working? So you were pretty much working on it actually in the hospital, right? Thought-wise, and were you writing lyrics down and musical ideas, or did you just have to wait until you got home to do any of that?
Well, while I was there in hospital, because basically I had to relearn to walk again, pretty much, because I was off my feet for so long that when I stood up the first time, it was like learning to walk again. It was unbelievable. One of the hardest things, but one of the most rewarding things I've ever went through. I started writing ideas down, like point form in my little book that I had there. And these are all things that I kind of give eventually to you guys in the club as well, like all my little handwritten notes and stuff, just so you guys can see where all these things come from. But I started doing that all in the hospital. When I came home, I still needed to use a walker because I was still a little like a newborn baby deer on my legs at first, right? So I had to, learn how to walk again still and properly work on it still. But while I was doing that, I was down here in my little home studio, and I started grabbing my guitar, putting up my Pro Tools, and started dropping little song ideas here and there. And that's really how it started. When I came home from the hospital, I started coming up with little ideas, and once I had enough ideas down, I started forming them into full songs.
Was there ever any thought before of you just having other people play on this, or was it just, this is going to be a project just for me?
To be honest with you, Steve, the first time I thought about, when I was thinking about doing this, I really wanted to do it by myself, mainly because it was such a personal story I was trying to convey to begin with, that I don't know how I would be able to relate some of these things to people that I was bringing into it, to, like, for guitar solos and for pieces like that, where I wanted a certain feel in it. Unless you've actually busted your leg like that, it's hard for me to say, give me a feeling like how it felt when you first dropped down on the floor.
Okay.
How are you going to tell that to somebody?
It's kind of tough to put in an ad in a music paper.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So basically, I wanted to do it all by myself. And another reason why I wanted to do it all by myself was because I was a little bitter at that point at musicians in general, because I was running into that kind of musician where you would ask them to do something and they would always come up with some reason not to do it. Oh, it's my third cousin's, anniversary of when he first blew his nose or something, there's always some stupid thing that came up that they had to do that prevented them from doing things back when I was in bands before. So I was always like, you know what, I don't want any delays. I don't want any excuses. If I do it myself, the only person who is going to delay me is myself, right? So I was in control of the whole thing, top to bottom, recording, producing, mixing, mastering, writing, singing, everything. So I just had nobody to blame but myself. So I took it fully upon myself, and I thought it turned out good, all things considered.
I thought it turned out fantastic. When I first started corresponding with you on Facebook and everything through KISS FAQ, when I had the concept of this podcast, I said on the show with Carl Kennedy, he was the first person I thought of to have as a guest on here, and you were probably the second. I just love the album. I love the feel of it, and I had gone back and forth with you a couple times about different prog rock stuff. I started, actually, since listening to Projekt Gemineye, I started listening to some more of the prog type stuff, like some Yes and things like that. I just love it, though. I mean, I think it's a fantastic album. It's produced great. How do you get to the point where you say, okay, this song is good enough?
There has to be that moment in your mind when you say, okay, it's going to be overkill. You know what I mean? Like, because when you're at this time now in music development, now I'm talking about technology too, like you have Pro Tools and you have all these kind of recording systems now where there's no limit. You can have like 500 tracks, okay? And back in the day when I was first getting into music, you were limited. You had 16 tracks or 24 tracks, and you had to learn how to get your idea across on those tracks. Otherwise, there's no other choice. If you wanted to do another vocal and there's only 24 tracks, well, guess what? You're shit out of luck. So you have to figure a way to get your point across using those tracks. But now, because you have Pro Tools, you can do whatever you want on it. You can go so overboard. But that's the one thing I wanted to bring into this project was I don't want to tell myself that I can put another 3 vocal tracks down or another 7 lead guitar parts or something. I wanted to make it produced but believable too. You know what I mean?
Right. Did you record these to make it playable live? Is there any chance of the Projekt Gemineye live show coming out, playing any of these songs?
Yeah, I definitely want to play these songs live. I definitely want to get back on stage. It's been a while since I've been on stage, and that's kind of hard for me because there was a point in my life back when I was at Wreckin' with One and with Pile Driver and stuff like that I was playing live like every week almost, and like it was like nonstop. I was playing a lot. If I wasn't playing, then I was rehearsing. If I wasn't rehearsing, I was recording, and it was pretty busy. And I loved playing live. It was something that I just got really good at and enjoyed doing. And because I haven't done it in so long, the urge is there. But I wanted to take the approach now, but I didn't want to make some of the mistakes I did when I was younger. And that was going out maybe too quickly before I had established a proper fan base or before enough people knew about my music. Because I didn't want to go out and, I'm at the point in my life where enough people know about me and kind of, respect me enough as a musician that I don't want to go out there and play in some, toilet club where it's like a piece of crap board and stuff like that. And, I just don't want to play in a, I don't know, something, I don't know how to put this, but I don't want to step back. I want to step forward, I want to be able to put myself in a position where I can go out and start playing decent gigs. And the only way you can do that is by having a decent following. And the only way you can have a decent following is by having people who are into your music and people who buy your music and who are willing to come out and support your music.
Absolutely. I had always to possibly at some point see these live, and it's a great album. It's an intricate album, but I think you could definitely pull it off live. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I already thought about this. Like, for sure, I already know what I'd have to do. A drummer, obviously, bass player. I would definitely need to get myself a decent keyboard player. That's pretty essential in this band. And I would have to get me to sing and play guitar and another guitar player. And I think that would be the perfect lineup for the band.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the songs. Like I said before, I went through the album and I listened to each song, and I just have a couple comments on the songs. BC, feel free at any point to jump in here. Starts out, title track, Ordinary Day. I thought it was a very atmospheric song. I think it definitely set the tone for the whole album. And the beginning with the kind of descending woodblock kind of sound, it is definitely very 2112-ish. I love that part.
Yeah, I mean, there's a definite tip of the hat to Rush there. I mean, whether, I've had so many people bring up the Rush reference in it, and I have no problem with that because I love Rush, and to be compared to Rush is a compliment in my eyes, obviously.
Definitely. BC, what any thoughts on Ordinary Day?
Oh, I mean, it was different when I first listened to it, and like I said, I started getting, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, sucked in, drawn into it. And
yeah, it's definitely definitely sets the tone for the album. And then we move on to the To the Future, which I think is a fantastic song. It's very Pink Floyd-ish to me. I like that muted picking in the beginning. I think that it goes perfect with the vocal at that point. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, Pink Floyd is a band that has a very important place in my heart as well, musically. David Gilmour, as a guitar player, I've always loved. I mean, not only in Pink Floyd, but I've really enjoyed his solo output as well. On an Island, I think, is one of the more interesting solo records. I mean, it's a very mellow record, but it has such a great vibe to it. And I think one thing that I tried to do on this album, and something that I learned from David Gilmour, is that just as important as technique, but mood and feel are such an important thing in a song. If you have a great mood and a great feel to a song, people will really connect to it.
I think you definitely hit a great mood in that, and I love the bass sound in that song. And with speaking to you earlier about breaking your leg and being in the hospital like that, the one line in there is, the first step is always the hardest one to take. And I could definitely see you writing that in the hospital and thinking about that when you finally, got out of that bed and started to learn how to walk again.
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, The Future is about that point in my recovery where I kind of was sitting up in my bed for the first time, maybe after surgery, and thinking, now, what the hell's going to happen now? Like, will I be able to recover from this? How hard will the first step be to do it? Because they always warned me. They said, listen, when you first stand up, it's going to feel weird. Your leg hasn't felt like pressure on it yet. So that's where that line came from. You're 100% right, Steve. The first step is always the hardest to take, right?
I like that. And at the end, I believe it says unclear, correct?
Yeah.
And that I would assume factors right in there too. You're taking that first step and you're getting out there and you're not really sure how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I mean, nothing was certain at that point. I mean, except for the fact that if I wanted to get back to a normal existence, then it was all on my shoulders, and I had to put in the work to do it. But the future was not certain. Nobody could have came up to me and said, I guarantee you that everything's going to be back to normal.
Right, and it's pretty much like anything really in life. You're gonna get out of it what you put into it. But I mean, something like that, it's just all that much harder because of something you've been doing for 20 or 30 years, whatever you've been doing, meaning walking, and then all of a sudden you're struck down. You're kind of not sure how the rest is going to go. I'm sure you didn't. Yeah. That wasn't in your life plan at any point.
Exactly, and just one more thing quickly about that is that I wanted very much these lyrics to be also written from the perspective that not only is it about me and my recovery, but people can try to attach these lyrics to their own struggles as well. I think they would tie over pretty decently.
Oh, I believe so. Definitely. Next song, Funny Feeling, which is another great song. BC.
This song and The Journey are probably my two favorite. I don't know why. Just they hit me.
I like
the vibe you get from something. These two hit me.
It has a great vibe. It's got that build up in the beginning, and I love the siren-like keyboards in the beginning of that song. That na 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 na. I mean, it's very, very cool, kind of like an emergency type warning keyboard sound, and the bass is great, and the little bass parts right before the lyrics begin reminds me so much of the Geddy Lee bass parts towards the very end of Red Barchetta when the song's winding down. That's the bass reminds me of that, like, part of the Red Barchetta.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, to be honest with you, that wasn't maybe in my mind when I did it, but I can totally hear it when you bring it up because, Moving Pictures was such a big record in my house. My sister had that record when it first came out, and so that record was played frequently. And I mean, being a big Rush fan, Geddy Lee's bass playing has just totally seeped into my conscience as well, right?
Oh, I'm sure it's got to be.
Funny Feeling, that song. Yeah, and Funny Feeling, basically, that moment when I told how I said that a few days before I broke my leg started acting up and I had this weird feeling in my leg, hence a funny feeling.
Right.
So that was the moment in there where I kind of realized something was wrong, right? The Journey, which is the epic and probably my song that I like the most off this record. I mean, I love all of the songs. They're like your kids when you write songs. You can't really say you love one more than the other, but the Journey I really like because I think it came across really well production-wise with that kind of keyboard bit at the beginning with that at the top of it there, and all those weird keyboard parts in there at the top. And basically the Journey, long story short, is basically the part of me in the ambulance taking the ride to the hospital.
Right, because that song mentions the paramedics, correct?
It sure does, yeah.
Okay, I thought that was it. And to me, that song, I don't know if these guys are an influence on you or not. I believe it has a definite typo negative feeling to the song. And just I think that song could be on October Rust and fit in perfectly.
You know what, Steve? I'm so happy you said that, and I'll tell you why. October Rust. Now, yesterday, I went through my CD collection hunting for that CD down because when fall comes, I always put that album on because it's a total fall record, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
And you're asking, how you just said before, you're wondering if Typo Negative have any kind of influence on me. Let me put it to you this way. When October Rust came out, right before they had that album Bloody Kisses, I saw them open for Queensryche.
We saw them on that tour too.
Yeah, at the end of that tour, they came to Toronto, and I saw them there on that show. And after that, when October Rust came out, and the World Coming Down, which is the record after that,
right.
I think I saw Typo Negative in Toronto 10 times.
Wow.
For those two albums, because I must have
Really?
saw them at least 4 times per record. I saw them at least. So I love Typo Negative.
We only got to see them twice, but they were a fantastic band. I mean, total tragedy when Peter Steele passed away. We actually saw Typo Negative probably 3 to 4 months before he passed away. Not even. And I mean, it was like, holy shit! Like, you know, I mean, here's a guy, he's 7 foot tall. We saw him in this club in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and you know, it didn't matter. He could be at the back of the room because you could still see him because he's just such a towering figure. But October Rust is great, and I thought that song could definitely be on that album. It definitely has that feel because it has like the bell like sounding keyboards on it, and the bass at the beginning is kind of Typo Negative-ish, and I like the keyboard sound at the very end is very cool too.
You know, the one thing I always tell people, like sometimes I have, you know, some younger musicians ask me about stuff, whether it's songwriting or production. I always tell them that there's nothing wrong with showing your influences, but don't like hook yourself just on that. You know what I mean? Like try to make yourself, try to show some of your own style and your own originality in it. But there's nothing wrong with throwing a little tribute here and there, or tipping your hat to a certain style, because that's what made you the musician that you are, right? Oh,
you're taking a little bit of everything that influences you. You know, I would imagine, and I'm sure. And I hope I'm glad you took it as a compliment that, you know, that it did remind me of Typo Negative. But I mean, it's another great band to be associated with, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And then, you know, like I said, that was a sad day for me too when Peter Steele died, and I really dug that band. I mean, the one thing that I really liked about them as well, and this sort of kind of floated over into my whole mentality of how I approached this band as well, is that they were known for walking out into the audience and watching the opening bands when they were headlining, and they would just be in the crowd. And I remember twice in Toronto, I'd be standing there, you know, rocking out, watching the band, and I turn and look at my right, and all of a sudden I see Josh, like right beside me, standing.
Oh, really?
And I look at him, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? He's like, hey, man, like he's just talking to you like you're like just like a regular guy. And he's a regular guy, and
he's a fan too.
Yeah, you know, and I met Peter Steele twice, and he's a really cool guy. And Jesus, the guy is just gigantic.
He is huge,
like,
isn't he?
Yeah, so him and Chuck Billy are two of the biggest guys I've ever met in my life, but they were both super cool.
That's great. That's great. And we move on to Fate Unknown, which I think is probably the heaviest song on the album. Mm-hmm. I love the drums on it. Can you tell us about the recording of the drums on this album?
Basically, what I decided to do, because I wanted to take this all onto myself, I'm not exactly what you would call a fantastic drummer, right? Myself. So basically, I had to use technology to help me on this. Now, I hate using like drum machines and stuff like that. It sounds like, like a robot drumming. Right? So I wanted to steer away from that as much as possible. But because I'm a huge Devin Townsend fan, I have to thank him for this actually, because he was hyping this program called Easy Drummer 2, right? And he said that he used it. Yeah, but he released this record, and he said that he did the whole drum stuff on this program, right? He said it was really simple to use, but more importantly, the reason why I used it once I really researched it is that this is not a program where it's like you go and you hit a couple of buttons like kick, snare, kick, snare.
Right.
It's nothing stupid like that. What it is they get real drummers, okay? Like Joey Tempesta and all these guys to go into the studio and they drum, right? And the computer makes MIDI files out of what they've actually drummed physically, record it all, and then they also have a section where they record the actual audio in a studio of them drumming, and you get what's called loops, right? So they'll drum like they'll do a song, right? And then on the program it'll say intro, verse, chorus, bridge, and they'll give you like 5 different selections for each thing. And you hit it, and they'll give you a drum pattern. Now, it's them really drumming it. It's not like some robotic drum thing. So, this is the longest process of the whole record, because I went through this with a fine-tooth comb. I bought like 7 expansion packs, everything from Metal Machine to Rock Solid to Metal Heads to Progressive Expansion. Everything that I could find that was metal-based, I bought, and I made drum patterns using these drummers' drum patterns. You know what I mean?
I think there is not one drum part on that album that does not fit perfectly, and we kind of actually, for anyone out there, Mark and BC and I we did meet face to face in Nashville at the Rock and Pod Expo. And, we spoke to Mark a little bit. I didn't want to bother you too much because I know you're looking for vinyl and you guys had your own table and stuff. And I was dying to discuss this album with you, but we had already set the date to record this show. And so I didn't want to talk to Mark about the album at that time because I wanted our discussion to be fresh here. But I did ask Mark. I was aware of sort of how the drums were done on this album, but I wanted to make sure it was okay with Mark to discuss this. And I like I said, I wanted the discussion to be fresh. So, I mean, like I said, there's not one part of the drumming on that album that I think is out of place.
No, I mean, It's very, like you said, you didn't want a drum machine feel.
It doesn't have that.
It doesn't have that. Like you said, we're interested in how you did that, and that's interesting. I never heard of that until just now. How that was done. Sounds pretty. Gives it more of a human feel, I guess you could say.
Yeah, because the fact is, it is a real person drumming it. Basically, all it is just imagine somebody going into a recording studio. Like if I hired, let's say, Neil Peart, okay, and said, okay, I want you to go in for 2 hours, do a bunch of different examples of a verse pattern or a chorus pattern, and do different variations of it. Okay, he goes and records it. He gives me this huge file of different kinds of drum patterns. Now I come and take those patterns and say, okay, I like this part for this section of my song. I like this part, but I don't like his drum fill. So I'll take the drum fill out and go into the section where he did all his drum fills and pick a different drum fill and put it in there. And that's how it all got constructed.
That's great. Like, that had to be, like you said, that was the longest thing for you to record on this album, and I could see how that could be, definitely.
Just like some of the songs with the hi-hat, the whatever part it may be, it's a computer can't do that. or program can't
Yeah,
do
I
that.
know.
No.
It had such a. I was like, wow, how do you do that? But now that you explain how it's done, I can see it now.
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad we were able to get into that part of it. And we'll move on to song number 6, Ride On. Instrumental tune, very cool song. I like the woodblock sound in it. I think it ends kind of abruptly though. I was like, kind of like, ooh, seems like I was just really, really getting, and then like it kind of seems like it ends abruptly.
That's why the next album's coming out.
Okay.
See, I think BC caught on to it there. Because basically, just to let you know, I purposefully placed it there because, just as BC pointed out, I wanted that feel of where somebody would actually say, oh, what's next? I wish there was more, you know what I mean, to it. And I think it did it as BC figured that part out. I think at least I figured it, right?
Oh, I agree. I definitely agree. I mean, it's definitely something that leaves you wanting more. Definitely.
And,
I definitely
and
give
ironic.
you... Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and ironically, that's also the proper ending of the whole story as well. So that's supposed to give you the feel of like, okay, so what's next? And album 3 will take it from there, right?
Awesome. Now, did you record everything? Is everything recorded for Brand New Day? Did you record everything at once and just split it up, or did you do this and then do the other songs?
Everything was recorded all at once together. So everything for Brand New Day was recorded at the same time as Ordinary Day. The only thing that is different in it is that I mixed, because I picked those 6 songs out of the 12. Right. Now, and I mastered them obviously. And then for Brand New Day, I just finished, yesterday, the final mixes on Brand New Day. So the mixing got done separately for it. So there is going to be maybe a teeny bit of a different sound. Not much. I mean, I did put up a couple samples on my YouTube channel there for the announcement of the new record coming up. So there is on there an example of that's not mastered. That's only mixed.
Okay. I was just going to ask you about that. The ones that I did listen to that, and I think I commented on Facebook. I mean, it sounds great. I cannot wait for you to for that to come out. And you did vinyl with this, which is awesome. I bought a copy of it, which I do not have a record player at this point. But I can't wait to get it. I definitely want to spin that on vinyl.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing I wanted to definitely do. I mean, vinyl has made a resurgence, and I wanted to be a part of that because I love vinyl. And the other thing too was that I wanted to do something for the supporters. Like, people always come to me and they say, well, why do you call them supporters? Why don't you just call them fans? I don't think fan is a disrespectful term, but I look at my people who have supported me as that, supporters. They're more like friends and family to me. I don't look at them as just like strangers now. So I don't call you guys fans. I call you guys supporters because I think that you're very important in the whole development of this. That's why I made the fan club, and that's why I like doing those kinds of things too, where I give people, little trinkets and stuff like that, and little looks into the making of the record and all these extra little videos, because I kind of took a cue from Kiss from that. They had the kind of Kiss thing where they would give posters in their albums and stuff like that, little extra things that regular bands wouldn't do, and I wanted to do that as well for the people that supported me.
That's excellent, and I appreciate it. Like I see this stuff come in the mail, I'm like, ooh, it's like a little mini Christmas present or something. It's great.
Yeah, and I mean that's what and I'm getting a lot of people who are saying that too, who are in the club as well, and now because of that and because of people like you and Brian and Mark Arnold and people like that who are out there and who are constantly making comments, I keep getting messages every day where somebody's like, what's this Gemineye club? And I tell them to them, and one more person gets added to the club.
Excellent. See, the internet is good for some things,
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Okay, Mark, awesome. We love Ordinary Day. We cannot wait for a Brand New Day. And at this point, we're going to transition into our hidden gems.
All right.
All right, and now it is time for our weekly segment of Hidden Gems, and we are going to let our awesome guest, Mark, go first. Go ahead, Mark.
The reason why I'm bringing up this band, actually, is because I mentioned it to you the other day, and you said that you were not familiar with them, and that is Max Webster. Now, Max Webster is a band that's fronted by a gentleman named Kim Mitchell, who I don't know if you're familiar with him either.
The name sounds familiar.
They're very popular in Canada and in parts of Europe. They toured with Rush like a lot, like especially in 79, 80, around that time. Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, they toured with Rush a lot. And they're basically, how would I put this? They're like Frank Zappa and the Mothers, but the Canadian version of it. They have some really like insanely complicated stuff and some really comical stuff and some really great songs, like stuff that you would scratch your head and go, how the hell did they think of parts like that?
Oh, really?
I'll reference two songs that I think you guys should take a listen to get what I'm meaning. The one song is called "The Party," like the party, right?
Okay.
And the other song is called "Toronto Tontos." Now, if you listen to those two songs, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about by saying that these guys are really off the wall.
Okay, well, absolutely, we'll check them out. We're always looking for something new and different and even crazy to listen to. All right, awesome. Go ahead, Dylan.
So my hidden gem this week is an offshoot of one of my favorite artists of all time, David Bowie. He, in 1989, I believe, yes, 1989, formed a hard rock band called Tin Machine. And I was recently re-listening to their debut album, and it's amazing. I absolutely love it. I love Bowie getting a little heavier than he usually does. Just an amazing album. One of my tracks that I think is amazing on it is Under the God. Like, it's just so... It kicks your ass. It's so... I just get excited talking about it because I love seeing Bowie in this kind of form. He plays rhythm guitar on the album, so it's always awesome when Bowie gets to play some instruments.
Dude, if I was there, I'd shake your hand because that record, I absolutely love it. I went to a record show recently and I found a promo copy of that record. Oh. Like absolutely pristine vinyl promo gold stand copy of it, brought it home, and you're right, it is absolutely amazing. David Bowie in a band context like that is so good. Great choice.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. He does like a cool version of Working Class Hero by John Lennon on there. There's so many awesome original songs. The title track is great. There's not a bad song on it. It's amazing.
That's cool. Right before we came on the air, Dylan said, Dad, if I pick Tin Machine, and he kind of looked at me like I know who, and I'm like, yeah, David Bowie. And I said, absolutely. I said, I'll bet you Mark loves them. Did I not say that?
Yeah.
And Mark, you didn't let me down, buddy. BC, anything on Tin?
I love it.
It is. It's very good. I haven't thought of Tin Machine. I'm gonna have to pull them up.
I'm going to check out that.
You never heard Tin Machine?
No.
It's different for David Bowie. It's got a hard rock feel to it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very cool. All right, good pick, Dylan. Good pick, Mark. BC, go ahead.
I'm going to go with the band this week. All the way from Madrid, Spain, Lords of Black.
Ooh, that is good.
I mean, I don't know how they're classified as a Spanish power metal, which I never knew there was.
They're relatively new, too.
2014 was their first album, and then followed up by Lords of Black 2 in 2016. But after that, after the second album, I really haven't heard too much about them. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right spots out there, but I can't see why they would fold up. But then again, the United States,
you never know.
Sucks for.
They may be playing, soccer stadiums in Europe.
Oh, I can guarantee they are. But
okay, cool pick. Mark, are you familiar with them at all?
No, I'm not. But I'm gonna guess what I'm gonna be doing after we get off of here.
All right,
checking
good.
them out.
That's the whole idea. And my pick this week is going to be a little more mainstream, and it's by a band that you probably have heard of before out there. And the band is Motley Crue. Okay. And I'm going to pick the album that I think is a totally under the radar album, and you hardly hear it mentioned in circles. And it's the new Tattoo album. It came out in 2000. It was the only album to not feature Tommy Lee on drums. Samantha Maloney plays on drums on that album, and I think it's an excellent album. Hell on High Heels, Treat Me Like the Dog I Am, New Tattoo, First Band on the Moon, She Needs Rock and Roll, Punch in the Teeth by Love. Great album. I think it doesn't get enough props out there.
Because it does have the hits.
Yeah.
And
yeah, but you know what? I think that it's a good album. I think it got the short end of the stick for two reasons, and both of them are because of, because Tommy Lee's not on the record, people kind of poo-pooed it, I think, and because Sam Malone played drums on it, I think they also poo-pooed it for that. But, I think that it's a return to form. I think Generation Swamp was garbage.
I hate that album.
That was horrible.
Yeah, and I think that this was a great recovery from that, and I think it should have gotten a lot better reception than it did.
I agree, and we saw them on tour for that album, and Samantha Maloney, she was great, you get love to see Tommy Lee up there, but she kicked it in. I think she did really well.
She filled in the gap.
She did. Okay, awesome. So there's our hidden gems, everybody. And right now, before we let Mark go, we're going to have a little talk about Mark's awesome country to the north of us here, Canada. And we're going to just have a little mini general discussion of Canadian rock bands. Any you would recommend to us, Mark, that we may not have heard that we would be able to find?
Now, we've heard of Justin Bieber, so you don't have to tell us that.
Yeah, don't tell us about that.
Justin Bieber, that's a sore spot here in Canadians, just like Celine Dion is as well. But there's, I'll tell you this: for the longest time, Canada was not a country that produced a lot of things. I mean, if you look back, you had like the Guess Who, and Neil Young came from Canada, and that was kind of the original, roots of Canadian music there. And then you started getting bands like Rush coming out of there, and you have Triumph coming out, right? And then you had April Wine and bands like that coming out. And now that music has sort of branched out, and people started taking Canada more seriously because of bands like Rush and Triumph and stuff like that. You have bands like the Tragically Hip that came out. You have bands like I'm trying to think of Sloan and stuff like that. Those are more like I would consider like radio rock stuff.
Right.
But but then you have like bands like Anvil. You have bands like Razor as well that are pretty popular. I mean, Pile Driver, right? They're Canadian stuff as well. I think that because of our amount of people in this country here, we don't have as many bands out there as America would, obviously.
Right.
Because you guys have like 20 times our population, so there's obviously a hell of a lot more bands and a hell of a lot more successful bands out there because of that, right? But I think that the amount of bands that are developing from here are increasing all the time.
I agree, and it's unfortunate here, I guess. I want to say Brian Vollmer, from the singer from Helix, was on Eddie Trunk's show, I think, a couple years ago, and they were talking about why doesn't Helix play in the United States as much? And I guess it's a lot easier for a band in the United States to go to Canada to play than it is for a Canadian band to come to the United States to play because of work visas and specific dates and all this kind of shit. But you could definitely speak.
The
Go
thing
ahead.
is more. No, I was going to say that you're right about that, but more the problem is that in Canada we have something called CanCon, which is basically a government thing where the radio here has to play a specific amount of Canadian content on radio. So even if Pantera and Deftones and all this and Metallica and all this stuff, there's so many bands that radio wants to play, they have to squeak out 30% of their playing has to be Canadian music in there.
Really?
Now the problem, Now the thing is, I don't think that they approach it that way in America, so that just of a Canadian band being played in America are probably a hell of a lot less unless they're really doing something big, like let's say Rush is coming out with a new record. They might play that, or maybe in places like Texas where Triumph is gigantic. Texas radio stations would probably play Triumph on there, but what are the chances of hearing, like Canadian music in Pennsylvania, for example? You know?
Yeah, we're gonna hear like maybe Bryan Adams. We'll hear some Rush. Triumph, maybe.
That's a long shot.
Maybe.
Rock 107.
Rock 107 once in a while. You may hear like
Once every
Magic
3
Power
months.
or something like that. But I believe that Canada is well represented in music. Like bands like Killer Dwarfs, Coney Hatch. We got to see Coney Hatch. I saw them open up for Iron Maiden in 1983, and they're still doing stuff. They put out an album, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, I think. Coney Hatch, I think it's just called 4, and it's great, just excellent.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to also bring up other bands that I think maybe your listeners, if they're not familiar with them, should really check out, like Voivod, for example. I mean, there are 2 records that Voivod did that had Geddy Lee involved in, which is called Angel Rat, and then there's another record called The Outer Limits, which is total like prog metal. And Voivod, when they started, they were much more thrash metal kind of stuff before.
Right.
But they really kind of developed their sound, and they turned into a really they did an amazing cover of Astronomy Dominant by Pink Floyd on one of their records too. So Voivod is something you should definitely check out.
Did they Voivod have Jason Newsted in them at one time?
Yeah, he was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and
As
another
Jay
band that's good to bring up, and I'm surprised I forgot to mention them, is Annihilator.
Okay, yeah, I heard of them.
Jeff Waters is probably one of the most respected metal guitar players in Canada, period. And he had a kind of opposite problem where you're saying, Canadians playing in America. He even had problems playing in Canada because he refused to, like what I was saying earlier, he refused to play dives in crappy places for $50. He thought he was more respected and should be respected more than to play dives. And so he was huge in Europe, so he always toured in Europe. So Annihilator, check it out. There's a really, really awesome Canadian metal band.
Definitely check them out. BC, you got anybody?
Kick Axe. Come on, how can you forget about
Oh, love Vices.
Vices and Welcome to the Club. I mean, after that, Rock the World was okay. And then that one they just came out with in 2004, just
Kick Axe 4, right?
Kick Axe 4. It was good. I mean, but it's hard to.
I know. I remember just
Vices just
rocking the hell out to
that word of
Vices.
Vices.
Just great. Now, Mark, have you seen any of these bands we're talking about? Have you seen any of these guys live up there?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean,
Killer Dwarfs
like,
play Canada. They play quite often up there.
There you go, Killer Dwarfs.
And the United States, you just can't get here.
They were really awesome. Like I used to see them a lot in clubs, and then there was a really awesome tour that I went to see that came through, which had Ronnie James Dio, and that's when he was touring for Lock Up the Wolves. And the first 2 opening bands, like the very, very first opener, like the first band of the night was Killer Dwarves, and they were awesome. And then the second band was Yngwie Malmsteen, and then it was Dio. And it was a great show. And Killer Dwarves were really, really good, very entertaining. You had Russ Dwarf during the set. He would ride around in his little tricycle.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I mean, he was really very, very entertaining. And it's a great band. And I saw Voivod when they opened for Rush here in Toronto. And that was an amazing show. So yeah, a lot of these bands play here quite a bit. I mean, Devin Townsend, he's played a lot. I've seen him. We actually, our last show with Recommend 1, we opened for Devin Townsend here in Toronto. So that was a great show. But I'm telling you one thing, if you want to hear some really intense, fucking awesome metal, put on Strapping Young Lad. That's a metal band that Devin Townsend was in, that he started, and it's really intense. It's like Fear Factory plus, even harder, than that.
I will have to check them out.
It's really good. And if you might be scratching your head thinking, where did I hear this Devin Townsend guy before? He was the lead vocalist on Steve Vai's Sex and Religion album.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay.
Talking about
Go ahead.
the bands up there, how is the music scene in Canada, say, for like harder music compared to like the United States? I mean, I think it sucks in the United States for like anything harder music or out of the norm or popularity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let's
Like
put it
you
this
said,
way.
you caught these bands going to. I mean, Toronto. I was in Toronto in 2010. It seemed like that's a main hub. Is it a
Yeah,
hard?
it is a main hub, and the two cities that you want to play to if you're going to be doing a tour, let's say of like Eastern United States, you want to pop into Toronto and you want to pop into Montreal for sure, because those are hotbeds for metal and for hard rock stuff too. I mean, you can always see good metal stuff in Montreal, and even Quebec City is good. Now, let's put it this way: every city within Canada has its scenes. Like Halifax will have a scene as well. Saint John, New Brunswick would have a scene. Winnipeg was actually one of the better gigs we ever did with Reckon With One was in Winnipeg. It was unbelievable. It was a great bar there and great metal fans there. But the biggest problem with touring Canada and why most American bands and even European bands kind of go, Canada, is that the distances between cities are so fucking long.
Oh.
Like if you go from Toronto to Sudbury, that's 4 hours. If you want to go from Sudbury to Thunder Bay, that's like 18-hour car drive.
Oh my God.
No.
Yeah, and if you want to go from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg, that's another huge, like 12 hours, and there's nothing in between. Like if you go from Winnipeg to Regina, Saskatchewan, I'm telling you, this is no word of a lie. The Trans-Canada Highway that you would go on is straight, no hills, no turns. You could put like a rope with 2 bricks on the end of it to just balance your steering wheel, put a brick on your gas pedal, and go to sleep for 4 hours, and you'll never crash the car. You'll just go straight. Nothing will happen because it's just one straight road, nothing to see but tumbleweed and flatlands. That's the problem. People don't want to do these cross-Canada treks because it's just such long drives. You have to pay a lot on fuel. But if you get to these cities, you will find die-hard, starving metal fans that want to hear this stuff.
Okay, that's why I meant like United States, everything's like what's hip. You know what I mean? Like especially around our area, it's fad.
I know.
You got your hardcore.
We went to see Stephen Piercy one night, and there were 13 people in the venue, and that was including the staff.
We counted
Wow.
we counted everybody there, but he came out and he rocked
Yeah.
out, and the band was
He
great.
did.
And
We saw Faster Pussycat the next week in the same place, and there was maybe 30 people there. But it was,
Wow.
it's crazy, but it's, I mean, hey, we did our part. We were 2 of the 13 and 2 of the 30.
a lot of people bitch about it, but hey, if you don't come out, these bands aren't going to come here.
Yeah, that's
Exactly,
for sure.
and that's why these people do that. That's why people will break their balls, like these bands like Annihilator and stuff like that, Voivod, to do whatever they can to fly themselves over to the UK and fly themselves over to Europe because they know that they will be attended to with much bigger audiences,
Oh, God,
get
yes.
onto huge festivals, and that's worth it.
Right, and with you talking about the transportation, we talked about this on the Carl Kennedy episode also, that it seems like Europe, travel is a lot easier. You can jump on a train, you can, go to Amsterdam or Germany or, France, all in, the same day or same week or whatever, where you're saying you're driving, 12 or 18 hours to get just to the next place where you could play. But like the fans alone can just jump on a train, and you're absolutely right. I think a lot of it is a travel thing.
That's just it, because I mean, when I went and toured with Piledriver in Europe, that's exactly what happened. We took a train a few times and noticed that some of these fans were following us. Hold a festival, gig to gig on trains, or they would take, they would find like a big like tour bus kind of thing, and they would all hop on, and because transportation in Europe is really well done that way, that you can interconnect to things. It doesn't cost too much, and that's why people go and you see these guys on Facebook are saying, I went to 5 different festivals this summer. Well, you think to yourself, how the hell do you do that? Well, they did it because the transportation is cheaper and they get around, and the connection to these cities are really well done.
Yep. That's awesome. All right, we're going to wrap up our little quick Canadian forum here real quick. Mark, I want to give you an open invitation to come on the show anytime you like. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss or anything, we will be more than happy to have you come on again. And we definitely want to have you come on again once Brand New Day gets out. We'll do a brand new episode. And give us your last words, Mark, and plug your shows and your album and everything.
Okay, well, I'll definitely take you guys up on that because I really enjoyed being on here with you guys. I think you guys have a fantastic show. I listen to it every time it comes out.
Thank you.
I am a loyal listener, so thank you guys for making some very interesting topics to listen to. Right now, as I just said, October 9th, I will be releasing the first single from A Brand New Day. I will be releasing it on my YouTube channel, so if you go on YouTube and just type in Projekt Gemineye, spelt how it's spelt band-wise, which is with a K, not a C in the project, and I as an E-Y-E, not I-N-I, how it's normally spelled, then you'll find it on there. And I'm also still have copies of the vinyl of the Ordinary Day available. I am running out, though. I'm warning you, because stores here apparently have started picking up on it, which is very surprising, but
That's awesome.
happily surprised with that. And so copies are going, but if you want to get a copy, I just had a guy last night who messaged me and said, can I get a copy? And I hooked him up right away. So if you want a copy of the album, there's still copies available of the record. And when the record comes out in November, the next one, I will be most likely, well, no, you know what? I'm going to commit now on your show and say that I will do a CD and a vinyl version of that as well. So you'll have both copies available of the next record as well. And just another thing to really tell you really quickly is album 3, I have already pretty much written. I've recorded just drums for it though, but the next record is going to be on the way for 2018, and I'll even give you the title. The title is going to be called Man of Science, Man of Dream.
Cool, very cool. Is it going to be part 3 of the ones you're doing now?
It's a totally different storyline, and I'll just keep it to myself until it gets closer. But I'll talk to you guys about it sometime.
Oh, great.
So there's also a Projekt Gemineye Facebook page, and there's also a website, www.projectgemineye.com, which I thank Julian Gill for helping me set up. So there is a website.
Awesome. BC, anything else for Mark?
No, I'm waiting in the mail every day for the vinyl to come. So
it's gonna be there. I just got a picture. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw that there. So,
yeah, it's in the mail, so you should get it very shortly.
Okay, excellent. Dylan, do you have anything for Mark?
Thanks for coming on. It was really interesting listening to you talk about your history, and you've done so much. I'm very impressed with everything you've done. And Projekt Gemineye, such a great CD. I love listening to it, so kudos.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
All right, Mark, and I definitely want to thank you one more time. And like I said, the invitation is open. If you have any show ideas you would care to come and discuss with us, you are absolutely welcome to do so. And everybody out there, get a hold of Mark. The CDs, like he said, they're almost gone. It's called Projekt Gemineye, An Ordinary Day, and the new one is coming out, Brand New Day. So you guys check out Mark. You will not be sorry. If you like metal, if you like Rush or Pink Floyd, or like I said before, Typo Negative, check it out, you guys. You will not be sorry. It is awesome. And look out for us. We have a Facebook page. We're on iTunes, Ear Peeler, Castbox, pretty much anywhere you could hear a podcast. Check us out, Potter Than Hell. If you have checked us out today and have not checked out our past episodes, go back and give a listen. There's a lot of really cool subjects that we talk about there. We will definitely see you next time, and there will be a next time.